Hi everyone, today we're going to be taking a look at the Fractal Define S2 Vision. And it's Fractal's first attempt at a case with not just tempered glass on the sides, we've also got some on the front and on the top. So yes, we are on the floor and the Vision is on the left. A normal R6 is on the right. Now the main change with the roof, because we always start on the front and the top, is the glass panel for the roof. And it's a lovely dark tint. Now I'm already saying that I wish they did a white one, but they don't. In fact, I'm just going to leave there like that for a second. But if on the R6 you have the mesh panel on the top that you can see, and then you have a tray here which gives you offset access to fit up to a 360mm radiator in the roof. So there's loads of radiator area there. With the glass one though, if you have the glass panel fitted, because it's glass, it's not the mesh like on this one, and it does completely hinder airflow. There's no roof ventilation whatsoever with the glass fitted, which obviously for a lot of people would be a really bad thing, but because you can remove the glass, there's also a little tray just in here that you need to remove, but you can swap in, if you like, the panel that matches the R6 and then the mesh filter as well. Now they come in the box, so you have the options of the glass or the mesh straight away. So it's up to you whether you want to put a radiator or some fans in the roof, or you just want to go with the glass for the looks. I do think it is a bit of a shame that you can't have both, but that is just one of the options. It's either or either. So I've already shown you the glass roof. What I didn't say is there are actually two versions of this case. There is an all blackout version with no RGB, so that those of you out there that hate it and despise it have something less to moan about. But there is also this version, which does have RGB and it has 340mm fans in the front and 340mm fans in the back. Now this version is £224.99 in the UK, and the non-RGB version is £179.99 in the UK. Now this does come with a controller on the back, or you can put it anywhere that you want, but it's normally hidden somewhere because there's no real way for you to get it outside of the case. And this does mean that you can control the lighting without an RGB motherboard, and this is quite critical. But if you do have an RGB motherboard, you can control the fans easily with that because it's just an addressable RGB connector. But the fans, like I said, on the front, because this is the first Fractal where we've had an all glass front, so it does make it look kind of nice. But what this does is that obviously you can set them and you can go through all of the colours. Now there's static colours that you can go through, and I'm going to go through and show you all of the different colours just quickly so that you can see. When you do get to the light blue, that isn't white, that is actually a really, really light blue, which kind of fits in with the Game of Thrones kind of themes that have been going around lately. But there is a white right at the very end that I'll show you. Then there are some animated options as well, where you've got different versions of flashing and scrolling and all of that sort of stuff. This is all completely compatible with any addressable profiles that your motherboards might have, by the way. I kind of liked the white in the end. But the other thing to kind of point out, because of the angle, is there is an RGB strip on the inside of the case as well. Comes built in, is just there, and it all lines up with all the other fans and stuff as well. So it does give you quite a few options. Now I really like the glass on the case, but with the lighting, what it did make me think that the tint was a little bit dark, and that's why I keep going back to it. It would be really nice if they had a white version without a tint on the glass, and the borders just in white. Maybe that'll be something that the Fractal gods will smile down on us and get later. But the bulk of the case around that, or beside that, is basically the Define S2 that you would have been used to. But I'll give you a quick look round anyway, just so that you can have a glanders. So, round to the back of the case. The Fractal doors are really, really easy to remove and work with, and you can see the kind of tint that I was telling you about before. I did also say to you about a controller, and we've put R1 here, and it's just kind of hidden just out the way. Now, the reason why I said it was difficult to see where you'd be able to put that outside is there's no direct holes or anything that you could put outside the case. You could get a drill out and drill through the bottom or something and have it kind of hidden underneath, but there's no easy way to have put it anywhere on the case, which was kind of a shame because it could have been kind of hidden here really nicely, or maybe even along the bottom of the case, and it was something that Fractal kind of could have done, I think personally, but it was one of those things that just came inside the case rather than it being fitted. But while we are looking at the back of the case, what you can see just over here are two 2.5 inch, I'll call them solid state drive mounts. Just up in this top right hand corner, or it's really in the middle, is a PWM splitter. You can take a feed from the motherboard. There's a separate power to it, and it means that you can power another 9 fans in total on that. Sorry, 8 fans, 1 feed is from the board. Then you've got 3 of these vented hard drive cages. I would call those 3.5 inch hard drive cages, but if you have a lot of solid state drive or 2.5 inch style drives, you can fit those all in there as well. There isn't any direct airflow around the back of the case, but what you can see if you look through to the lighting that I've got going on around the back, there are some small vents around the other side in the main chamber. Airflow's never going to be massive from around that point though. When we do take a broad look around the back of the case again though, there are quite a few tie down points around the outside of the case for you to be able to keep the cables tidy. This area down here where the power supply is, there is an absolute acre of room at the back. I know I'm moving the camera around a lot, but it's just so that you get a good view as we're working around. There's more than enough room for plenty of cables, lots of grommets, and there's no reason really why you couldn't keep your rig quite tidy. Now this was obviously just put together for the review, and we've got some fairly standard hardware in the back of it now as well, because we're going to show you some proper temperature results a bit later on in the review as well. Not sure who the guy is with the questionable pink shirt, but he's going to pull the door off because, like I said to you before, essentially they're quite easy to use these because you've got a locating point at the front, which is where you put the door, and then you pretty much just push it in, and there are 2 tabs, and it's just the same as the R6, and I really liked the glass windows on that as well. One of the really nice things though is the cover for the front of the case, and essentially you can see that you do have some vents there. There is a grommet, but you've also got a couple of hose mounts there for water cooling if you wanted to use it. I have wondered whether you can like spin it round, but it's all actually cut perfectly to fit in exactly where it is, because if you could turn it around the other way, you could have had like a radiator underneath or something like that. We were talking about the vents before, and you can see through now. This is another reason why I've changed the lights in the background to red rather than them just being white, so that you can actually see through the vents in the case. And another reason for me bringing that up is you can see that there are vents above where the power supply would sit as well. Now, the equipment that we've got in the case might not be all singing and all dancing, but we are using this as the standard test setup now, because we have introduced thermal testing so that we can test things for you, give you a little bit more information, get a little bit more anal about things. I've been surprised how narrow the temperature results have been before though, but I will talk to you about the thermal results in a bit when we move on to the conclusion. You can see that there's acres of room in there. You can easily get a 60mm radiator in the front in push-pull with that tab taken out. If you don't want to take that section out, it's a 240mm rad or a 280mm rad in the front. And that is a very, very important thing to keep an eye on, because I've spoken to you about the glass. If you keep the glass in the roof, there is no airflow out of the top. So if you do have an AIO, an all-in-one water cooler, or a water cooling loop that you want to fit, you want to keep the glass, you're going to need to put your radiator in the front. So you can have a 240mm rad or a 280mm rad above this panel and keep everything looking clean. If you want to take it out, you can get a 360mm or a 420mm rad in the front. The 420, you're going to have to worry about end tanks and stuff though. I would say 360 easy, 420mm possible for those of you out there with a little bit more experience on how to set your loop up and spec your kit and all of that sort of thing. You do need to remember though that with the glass in the roof, the only exhaust fan is this 140 over here. It's not going to be the easiest thing if you've got AIO GPUs and that sort of stuff, but I think in reality, for the bulk of us, if you wanted Fractal and you wanted all glass, especially for that top-down view, then a 240mm rad in the front and that 140 out the back, set up correctly, shouldn't cause you too many problems. Round the back, we can have a look and see that there is layout so you can fit a vertical GPU if you want. You're obviously going to need a riser cable if you want to grab that. But you can also, don't forget, get kits that actually bolt in here so that if you did want to go vertical GPU, it will keep it slightly further away from the outside of your case. With the glass roof that I showed you before, this is the button that you have to press to release it, and it does just pop up. With mine, sometimes you do have to give it a little bit of a push. It's better with the clips when you've essentially, you just need to give it a bit of a proper whack and then get your thumbnail underneath it or something like that. It clicks in with a real nice positive clunk though. I think it's just designed not to move around too much, not be easy to get, you know, to be able to move or rattle. I was talking to you about the controller for the RGBs, and I do think they missed out on a bit of a trick. I did say it could go at the front, but the other option was, because of the massive amount of cable tidying room you've got down the side, I think they could have literally put a little hole down here at the bottom and then had maybe a screw hole or something for you to have put it down here, so you could have reached around the back of the case to change your lighting, because there is so much room round at the power supply end that it really wouldn't have mattered if you wanted to have had that hole there. And then when we scroll it back round and I have to move all the camera again, you can see exactly what I mean. There's loads of room there. It would have been a really nice touch to have put it there. Okay, so you've all been asking for temperature testing for quite a while, so we've been getting some results together quietly in the background, but I thought I would take the opportunity in this review to not only use them, but explain to you how we do it. So we are using a set amount of kit now. So we've got an old GTX 980 in there, just because I do actually have a couple of them, so it means I can use them both in these reviews and in the motherboard reviews at the moment. We've got a Cooling Master Hyper 212X Black in there for the CPU cooling. Then underneath we have an Intel i7 9700K. What we've done is we've set the clock speed to a manual 4.8 GHz constant, so it can't move around and throttle and, you know, different loads and all that sort of thing. So it's just going to be 4.8 GHz. Then we've also set that to a manual 1.2 volts as well. The GPU fans we've also set to 60% fixed. The hyper fan that we've got on here is wired into a 12 volt feed direct to the power supply, but then we've put a 9 volt power reducer on it. So it's like a little resistor. So essentially we've got fixed fans everywhere and fixed voltages everywhere on the board and the CPU itself. Then all we do is change the fan speeds for the case fans themselves. And what we've decided to do is we're going to do a 600 RPM very low mode. We're doing a 1000 RPM mode as well. Normally with cases, they should normally be able to do at least 1000 RPM. So this is normally going to be a very good kind of indication and comparison between all the cases. The 600 RPM may end up being a lower than some. So we've kind of gone with that middle ground with the 1000, and then we're also going to do a max RPM as well. So we're doing 3 different tests, but we're going to be monitoring the CPU temperatures and the GPU temperatures as well. So it's going to give us a fairly good way. Now, when I show you the results and stuff, I can pop this up. This is how we collect our data. Essentially what we do is we take all of the core temperatures, not the package temperatures. We take all of those, add them together, and then we divide them by 8 because that's 8 cores, and then that gives us an average number for the CPU cores. Then what we do is we remove the ambient room temperature from this, giving us our delta temperature in Celsius. And with the delta temperature, then that gives us if the room is a degree warmer for whatever reason, we do have air conditioning stuff, but it can flex, it can fluctuate a little bit, especially different times of the day. It's never an absolute 20 degrees. So by us using the delta temperature, it actually means that we've got a more accurate result, and it's the delta temperature that you will see in the graphs. Now, with the graphs themselves, what we've done is we have done one graph sorted by the CPU, and then one graph sorted by the GPU, just so that you can see the difference. So with the CPU testing, essentially, I mean, we've got the Corsair 678 in the graphs, and it was a little bit warm. And the only thing is with the Corsair 678 as well, it looks like it did a little bit better, but you need to remember there was a fan in the top right by the CPU, and that's kind of why the GPU temperatures are so much different on that one. But anyway, with the really low testing, the really low fan speed testing, the Fractal R6 actually came out fairly well, especially for the CPU. But then when you move on to the GPU, you can see that the vision kind of pulls in front a little bit, and the Fractal kind of goes up the graph. So it's separating the two like that and giving you the 600 RPM sorted in different ways actually does make the results look a little bit different. When you move up though to the 1000 RPM testing sorted by the CPU, what you can see is that the vision's done relatively well again, but when you move around to the GPU, the vision is done really well. It actually manages to top the graphs. And it wasn't until I was trying to decide when I was making these graphs which way I wanted to kind of swing with how I sorted them, and I saw that you could make things look quite different, that I then thought to myself, well, hang on a minute, that's actually going to be quite interesting to give people the differences. And then when we move on to the max RPM testing, essentially what you can see, if I pick up the right bit of paper, is I've put in the graph itself the actual max RPMs for the fans, because they're going to be different across the board, and it's going to be a good way for us to be able to pull between. And on the GPU testing, again, the Define does really well, especially against the R6. But then with the CPU, it's a slight bit different. Now with the CPU, I don't know, maybe that's something to do with the rear fan more than anything else, but the difference between the Define and the R6 is going to be the fact that with the R6, it only has two fans in the front. And I'm just double checking because I was actually starting to second guess myself then, but it does only have two fans in the front, and the Vision has that extra one below. So the GPU tests, you've got a little bit more of extra airflow, you've got all the extra vents and everything as well. So that's obviously proving to be quite a good thing. I'm not 100% sure why the CPU tests were consistently that little bit worse than the R6 though. But that may be something for you to keep in mind. Obviously it would make a little bit of difference if you were running an AIO or something like that, and we've gone very, very air focused. Now the Define hasn't kind of blown the world apart with the temperatures, especially with the very limited amount of results that we've got at the moment, and these graphs and results are only ever going to get bigger and more in depth for us to be able to do more comparisons. One of the things I would say is, out of the testing as I've shown you there, it has shown to be consistently good for air-cooled GPU temperatures. So maybe that's something you guys may want to keep in mind. The other thing that you may want to keep in mind, based on what we've said already about where the AIOs might have to go, is if you were running an AIO in the front, then that's going to mean that you're going to have slightly warmer air blowing over your GPU. But that's not really going to be something that you should worry too much about within a game, because there's not really the difference between gameplay temps with a CPU and CPU very, very intensive temps are going to be wildly different. The only thing that I would say, based on the testing that we've done, is if you end up setting your CPU temperatures, keep an eye on your GPU temperatures with this case, because you may find that you want to change your fan profile slightly earlier to kick in to help keep your GPU cool based on what we've already seen. So it may be that on a gaming kind of run that you'll have your CPU fan spinning that little bit more, just so you can help keep the GPU flow and temperatures that little bit better. So based on that testing, that would be my advice. and I hope that helps any of you guys that do end up actually purchasing it. So I think Fractal have made some really brave choices with the Vision. I love the glass on the front and the top, but having it on the top does also give you that kind of airflow kind of quandary where you're going to have to decide whether you want to go just for look so that you can look down inside, or you want to go for the kind of mesh version. I do think if you were going to put the mesh in the top and go that kind of route, it's a lot of money to pay for just the glass in the front. So I think in my own personal point of view, if this was the case that you were looking at, I'd only really be buying this over the normal S2 if you were going to keep the glass as well. Because in reality, just being able to see the 3 fans on the front, I don't think personally would be worth the extra money. But if you did want the glass on the front, the build quality is up to Fractal's exceptional standards. And as you've seen in our thermal testing before, it didn't really make a massive amount of difference between having it kind of meshed and not. Obviously, with the mesh, if you were to add more fans in, you'd have more airflow. But considering the temperature results that we did in an identical kind of R6 kind of configuration, I think it worked out kind of well. One of the things I would say is I would very, very much like to see Fractal continue in their original tradition of bringing us a white version of cases as well. They treated us with the R6 from straight away, which kind of worries me because Fractal did say to me at the time, if there's going to be a white one, there will be a white one from launch. And we're not seeing one now, which makes me kind of disappointed. But I've got one here and I'm going to keep talking because I'm unscrewing screws while I'm at it. But I think you'll understand why I want one when I put the white Fractal R6 side on it. And if you imagine that the rest of the case was white as well, and then you had that lovely white front on it, I think it would make an exceptional case, to the point I'd really like one Fractal on my desk, because I would actually use it. If they made one, I would genuinely put this on my desk, and I think that's a fairly strong statement to make for a reviewer that gets to play with a lot of kit. £225 is also not that bad a price for an all-glass case, but as I've stated before, if you're going to pull that top out and then just put the mesh in, I'd kind of sacrifice those 3 fans on the front and get the original S2. It's definitely food for thought. It's plenty for you guys to think about at home, but I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments underneath. But for now, this has been the tiniest one, giving you a quick look, maybe of what the Vision should have been. But anyway, of the Vision from Fractal. One for the outtakes. Oh.